Okay, here we are at the 2023 NXL World Cup layout review video. I can't believe it's already the end of the season. That came by fast. This is a long one, maybe a bit longer than my other layout review videos, but we go in depth at every point in this video. So if you feel like it's a bit too long, be sure to break it up into the chunks that I have outlined in the description below. Digest it over a period of time. It's probably the easiest way to view this type of content. But yeah, that's it. Enjoy the video. So the first thing is, as you guys can see, I've drawn the zones here for you. They're a little bit different, mostly because the snake zone is so far over. So again, as always, if you guys want to use the simplified zone calls, you could just call the outside zones on the Dorito Dragon and on the Snake Charlie. If you want to use the more intricate zones to help illustrate more of where players are not, then you can use these ones, which is Arizona, Oklahoma, Texas, Nevada, Iowa. I've talked at length about these zones. I know I say that every time, but we're not going to cover those here. So next, let's go into the back line now. So first things first, this snake side push is really interesting. I actually think my initial impressions are that this is probably one of the strongest bunkers on the field to control kind of the pace of either side. So obviously as practice, at practice, we'll figure that out better, obviously, as the tournament goes on. But this bunker is really, really solid. So we'll talk more about that as we talk about like the snake side / middle. But first things first, you can see that obviously you have a pretty big window shooting crossfield towards the Doritos. You also have a window to shoot at anybody prior to the God bunker or the insert into the snake, and then you have somebody that you can shoot at as they're trying to get to the snake. Whether you take a knee or you run up to this tower in front of you as you shoot, it's up to you. Obviously, it just kind of depends on the ratio of survivability versus accuracy. So that's the first gap. The next one you'll notice is as you try to pass this tower right here, the home can definitely shoot at you in this entire window from here to here, right? They can shoot you in that window. And if you come out farther, you can actually shoot back at somebody cross. The only reason why you would do this in my mind is if somebody is on the Dorito side punching up towards this wedge, because this would definitely be the challenge shot that you would, you'd both be shooting at each other here. So definitely an option. If we keep going now, you have what is pretty standard in terms of heads up gunfighting or heads up running and gunning, which is that you have your mirror and then maybe somebody who's trying to get in the snake first. So if you're fast enough, you can probably come up and shoot at somebody, but it'd have to be really tight, and you'd have to have that first ball be on. And the thing about the snake is there's multiple ways in which they can go. So they can either come out wide and then dive, or they can go straight in. And there's even something in between that, or obviously in the corner and around. There's lots of different options. So it isn't just as simple as, shooting the snake runner from this can. You might have to do, this angle, which is a lot easier, or maybe even something from the home, which, looking at it now, not a great spot. So going then out to the corner. So once we pass this can, the home can't really see us at this point, but anybody playing the tower is definitely shooting at us like we saw from the other angle. And then if we get out further, again, same sort of tower guy. You're pretty blocked out from the home at this point, which makes me think that the home will probably, for the most part, be shooting Dorito way. So I can't imagine too many points in which you aren't going to want to play somebody either in this gap or in this bunker, right? It's kind of one or the other. And if that's the case, then you probably won't have a home player looking this way. Even because, or for no other reason than like you don't have a great shot on anything on the snake except for this inside route. Which is definitely there. Don't get me wrong. That shot is absolutely there. But if you're wanting to shoot the snake, you're going to have this guy do that job, this guy here, or again, somebody who comes to the can and just like, that's a really tough shot. I know pros can hit it. Semi-pro players might be able to hit that, but that's a really, really tough shot. But otherwise, it seems to be that the home player is going to be doing more of the Dorito side shots because it's just, you're going to be running into each other if this guy in the snake is trying to shoot, or this guy in the tower is trying to shoot there, and you're shooting right behind him. So we looked at the snake side. Let's look at the Dorito side backline now. So again, the same sort of thing. This first step out, I don't think you have to worry about the home killing you. Honestly, that's really, really fast. The biggest issue is going to be somebody delaying, using this tower to shoot at you, or coming out to here and shooting you. So depending on what you do in this dead zone will dictate who you need to worry about more. It is possible for you to blind the tower guy. It just means that you're more exposed to anything heads up, any paint that's coming heads up. So you can isolate this corner shot, or rather this can shot on the snake side. But again, you're not really isolated at all to what's going on in the Doritos. If you find that for whatever reason people aren't playing this tower much, then you can come here and punch up. Or even if they are playing the tower, you can take this 50-50 as much as you want, assuming that you're hitting the shot, right? So that's definitely a shot I would try a lot through practice, or at practice this weekend, to make sure that you can shoot back at somebody who's going up to that tower. And then also try blinding it out and seeing how that feels. If we continue outward, it actually looks like this gap. So this gap right here, I think, is really the only one that we would have to worry about from the tower player, because I think if we want to avoid anybody who would be running and gunning to the can, we can pretty easily. So that means that that first gap is really the only one that we have to worry about, and then we're pretty safe, at least into this can on the Dorito side. Coming here, if we decide to shoot heads up, we have lots of room to shoot. I would, again, probably just shoot here if we're going to want to hit anybody going, as the runner. If we pull tighter, we can actually see a little bit of a Dorito move from, that seems to be the Dorito 1 to 2. So if somebody were to try and take that bite really quickly, we could definitely shoot that. I would probably, it's tough because your home player is really the one shooting for the Dorito runner more than anybody else. They also can shoot a bit of that, it looks like. It's a pretty tight shot, but you also, as a home player, could probably shoot that. But you could definitely shoot anything past it. Again, that's a pretty small window, and you don't have a lot of visibility into when that player is wanting to go. So you would have to be shooting all of your paint there to stop them. Not great options, honestly. I think the home bunker is a fine bunker, but I would probably just move out of here pretty quickly, which is pretty standard on most layouts. And then I also didn't mention this, but you actually have a decent amount of over-the-top shots. So over the top, you can shoot for the snake player. That's a really great shot. You do have a bit of a Dorito over-the-top shot. It's not as great, in my opinion, as the snake, just because you're shooting over a valley. The snake player, or excuse me, the Dorito player can probably go underneath that if they're going quickly. You still have this shot, obviously. Again, over-the-top stuff just means that you have to worry about your mirror shooting back at you. So there's definitely there's a cadence there with your opponent. If you're playing the number 3, you kind of get an idea of where they like to shoot. Do they like to shoot for the runner first and then challenge the mirror, or do they like to shoot for their mirror and then challenge the runner? So if you shoot at your mirror and challenge the runner, you have a much smaller window to hit that shot. Your first ball has to be on if you want to shoot towards your mirror, and then your next balls towards the runner have to be on. Whereas I think you're a little bit more forgiving if you shoot for the runner first, because then you have at least a 2 to 3 ball cushion, and then you can challenge your mirror and possibly get an elimination there. The biggest issue is you might be late, right? If you shoot for the runner and then challenge, and they challenged their mirror first and then shot the runner, you might actually accidentally come up into balls and die that way. So anyway, we don't need to get too deep into that for now. But if we keep going out towards the Dorito side, again, we would have to get through this gap now from the guy who's playing the can on the Doritos. There is a bit of a gap from the home. We saw this from the home's perspective just a second ago. So we do have to get through this gap if we want to get out to the Doritos. And assuming that we do, the other hard part is this next gap, which I looked at off stream. That gap is going to be hard to get through because, as you can see, even if I wrap, I can't see that player. So granted, my mirror, assuming that this is what the layout will look like at the actual event, we can't see each other right now. So that's fortunate that it actually allows me to kind of float back. So I can take a step back right here and then challenge them from this angle. The only concern is going to obviously be if for whatever reason somebody got up to this wedge and surprised me, but it would be surprising if you got surprised by that, right? It depends on how long you take. There are certainly routes that the middle player can take to come up here and then hold that gap, but we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Now that we've talked about the back line, let's actually look at the Dorito side first, and then we'll look at the snake, and then we'll look at the middle and finish with breakouts. So we just walked this side. Let's take a look more at what this can do. So the can doesn't have great coverage on the snake side. You obviously can, shoot any sort of heads that are popping out, but I always favor these angles in snakes' favor than in yours. So this is a bit of a tight spot to be in, worrying about somebody from the snake shooting your pack, right? You're safe, you just have to play tight. So again, you have a pretty standard, like you can challenge your mirror and you can hold a gap sort of position here. you can see, and you might be able to more at the actual layout or at the tournament, you can see a little bit of that Dorito 2 to Dorito 3 move, just a little bit. But if they get low enough, you might not actually see that. So who knows? We'll find out when we actually go to practice. And so if we then punch up here first to this tower has the same gap prior that we had here and here, but you actually now have a much better angle to hold the Dorito 1 to Dorito 2 move. So it might be that, you know, in typical layouts at the NXL, there's a really rigid if A then B sort of move from the number 2s, which is that if they get to this Dorito 1 and you know they haven't passed this spot yet, you can hold them here, but as soon as they break past that gap for whatever reason, you need to punch here and hold them at the next. Now, obviously, the issue with really rigid if A then B sort of play is that it can be very obvious for the Dorito player to know if my opponents are good and they know that, then I can expect them to be at this tower without even having to see them make that move. And if that person practices that snapshot, it can be really easy for them to eliminate you. So just be aware of that. Obviously, it kind of cuffs you in what you can do. And again, this angle might be much better at the actual tournament, so you might not have to move, but just be on the lookout for that at practice and make a decision from there. There's multiple ways in which you can get up. You can either just go on the outside, the wire side of the Doritos up to the tower, or you can go inside. Inside is always going to be riskier because you don't have a picture as to what is going on. So I'd probably favor the outside move, which does mean that if you're the number 2 and you're ahead of them, so for example, you know that your front player makes this move before they do, your next reaction to that should be to shoot paint right here to challenge your mirror from making that exact move. And that's going to be an ideal situation that if you can stay in this can and you have a guy in this Dorito 2 and they're forced to stay at the can in that Dorito 1, now you're starting to get more leverage over them in the Dorito side. So as the number 2, really quick, before we really put ourselves in the mindset of an attacker, is this a good support bunker? The answer looks to be no. So there might be a situation in which they're pretty far up the field. Let's say, for example, they're in this Dorito 3, where this might be a better spot to protect from, but honestly, this does not look like the case. You can see a lot more of this inside stuff in the 50 Dorito from this Dorito 1. But you know, some layouts favor that you follow right behind your attacker. Some layouts favor that you punch kind of the middle-ish side of your side of the field. This at a glance looks to be that, where you punch the middle-ish side of your field as opposed to following directly behind. But if we go to this next bunker, is it any better? It's a little better. So if they're in the Dorito 1, you can't stop them from this position, but you can shoot at the number 2 behind them. Again, I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a support player, not the attacker. Okay, so now from the attacker's perspective, if we get to this Dorito 1, like I said, you can isolate your mirror, at least from what it looks like right now. So you can isolate your mirror and you can float off and shoot towards the can. If you do this quick enough, you won't have to worry about this guy being here, but I'm talking you slide into this Dorito, you float off and take the shot and then punch. That's like, we're talking within the first 5, maybe 8 seconds of the point. I think if you take longer than that, you always run the risk of some guy punching the middle right away, getting here, and then looking for that immediately. So just be careful. It might be worth having a call very specifically for that, and it might just be that, you know, whatever you guys decide to call this bunker, you just shout that on the break. But this guy who plays out in this dead zone, if you know, let's say for example, let's say you call this Detroit. I'm just making this up, but let's say you call this bunker Detroit. If you float out of here and you see that somebody's taking a middle route, I would, as this player, just be shouting Detroit like crazy so that it tells this guy to play slower or something, right? Just come up with something. So assuming that wedge isn't a problem, nobody else can really stop you. I don't know how common it's going to be for people to play this bunker. Certainly if they do, that crossfield shot is going to suck for you. But I feel like the tower is just safer. And it gives you a little bit, you can retreat a little bit easier if you needed to than if you came all the way up to this laydown door to do that. But just be aware, laydown door does have really solid gaps on those first Dorito moves. They just can't really do anything on the snake side, and you could fill over to the snake. So I don't know. we'll see that. We'll look at that more when we talk about the snake side here in a minute. So assuming that we get this player to flinch, and also I guess looking at the, you know, let's say they're farther up the Dorito side than we are. Unfortunately, they can actually ignore us. Like as soon as they pass this Dorito, you really aren't interacting with each other if you're still here. The inside shot they could actually kill you with, so be careful of that. So if you are an attacker and you lose your number 2, you probably need to get to this Dorito as fast as possible. So this Dorito provides a bit more access, I guess you could say, to that inside channel on the on those 50 bunkers, but you can't protect the tape very well, which is unfortunate. You have a much better angle now to challenge the can player and the Dorito tower player, which was he a problem as well? Dorito tower player, if he's low, is a problem as well, I should say. So that Dorito tower is also a player you have to worry about. This gap might be even bigger at the actual event, so be aware of that. But also know that it's an either or thing, right? They're not going to be, at least I can't imagine, in high divisions they're ever going to be in this bunker and this bunker. So it's an either or. If you cannot see their number 2 shooting at you while you're challenging them here in the can, then you need to be careful about this tower here. You need to try and confirm that. So if your number 2 can see them, or whoever can, just try to figure out if they're there or not, because this is going to be a really scary gap to run through. But if you get to this bunker, you can challenge them here, no problem. Wrapping farther, again, this is where there are shots and angles that people can hit you from that are on the snake side. Those are really only concerns when people are doing like a really strong hold point where they're just choosing to shoot cross field. I don't typically, in a lot of layouts, that's not really the case where like somebody in the snake inserts shooting cross field because they're wanting to get into the snake. It might be the case that somebody in the snake 1 would do this, but I'm not sure how likely that is. Now is when, if you want to move to the next bunker and they are still at the back center, they will be a problem for you at this point. So be aware of that. You can get low enough, again, against your mirror to ignore them at this point still, which is good. And then, do we have any concerns about somebody in the snake? If they're in the 50 snake or the Viper, this would be a problem for you. So this is a situation where they can definitely apply pressure. They can eliminate you if you're not paying attention, if you're standing too tall. So, you know, I won't say that you should always be in a kneeling position in this bunker, but being in a kneeling position when you get to this spot will protect you from anybody in the Viper if you weren't aware that they were there. So be careful about standing too tall in this Dorito too, generally speaking. It looks like you might be able, depending on how big this gap is, you might be able to, you know, play in front of your gun, or I guess behind your gun on the Dorito tape, and then move up to this next spot. So moving up to this next spot now, you do have, obviously, I think you're a lot more exposed to the snake, but there's just not a lot of angles that they have on you. So given the fact that this is a flat angle, you are a bit more exposed, but the snake 1 is probably the biggest concern. They could be at this cake, but I'm not sure how many times people are going to stop at that, and we'll take a look at that when we actually go to look at the snake. You can now start to threaten a lot of stuff going on the snake side, at least in their support players. There's not much else you can do, it looks like, on the inside. So it looks to be that your default will be to play outside. If you're here, again, assuming that you can survive whatever's going on in the snake, because if you stand tall, this guy might just kill you. But now that you're here, you can actually prevent them from moving if you want. From the Dorito 1's perspective, we said that this player can actually just ignore whatever's going on in the Doritos. So if you actually play low, you can ignore that. And if you hear your teammate saying, hey, Dorito 1's going to go, then you can stand up and challenge them and prevent them from moving, or just periodically check them, you know, head check them off, whatever, keep them honest. If you were matched up in these Dorito 3s right now, I imagine that you, depending on, again, how the layouts, how tight it is at the actual event, you might be able to go around this bunker up into this door and you wouldn't see each other. So, but I'm not sure how tight that angle is. It might not be the case at all. And of course, as always, you can just take even a slight step out and shoot somebody doing that. And you obviously have the snake side tower to worry about, but otherwise you're pretty safe. So, unfortunately, you can't see the snake side tower until you commit to the move. So if you're able to low wrap, again, assuming nobody's matched to you, you can check them off here, maybe even get an elimination. And then coming up to we'll call this like, I don't know. We'll just call this whole cluster Omaha. This is kind of like a junction of bunkers. There's a lot of trickery, I guess you could say, that can happen here. So we'll see how this plays out at practice and especially the tournament, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of creativity in this spot in particular. If we take the, very traditional wrap and go route, we obviously have the tower that we can shoot at. Again, this Dorito 3 that we can challenge. If we come up over the top, we have the Dorito 1. If they're high, we could come over here, challenge them a little better. The Dorito 2, we could challenge. It just depends on where they're at. And then if we go inside this channel, again, I can't do that on the Go Sports app, the Guns Up app. But if we come here, now we either have to worry about the can or we can shoot the can. This would actually be, I think, a favorable shot for the can. But just make sure that when you run this route, that you're very familiar where the line is. So you need to know where that line is in this 50 bunker before the can sees you, so that you can snap out against them and not expose yourself. If you wrap farther, again, we have the tower on the snake side still. We have this baby Dorito, which I'm not sure how often people will play that, but we'll take a look at that in a minute. And now is when you get probably your first, we'll call it free elimination, which will be that snake insert bunker. And you'll probably kill somebody as well in the snake side tower. So those are pretty obvious angles to take. If you push up against this bunker, you might even get a snake side kill on that. What is that? Snake 3, maybe? It's hard to say. It's kind of an inside and outside channel. So this bunker here. So definitely look for that shot as well. Once you get to this point, it's kind of the same stuff, but even better. You now have that that snake side can. That's probably a free kill as well. Interesting, you can't see the home here. The home is right there. So surprising, but pretty decent. And then by the time you get to their side of the field, you should have everybody eliminated for the most part. But if we play the 50 itself, I'm just curious. You can see the home if you want to challenge the home for whatever reason. Obviously, you can see middle bunker stuff, which we'll take. We haven't really been that aware of that. The midfield, there's a lot of good bunkers in the middle, and I think that middle is going to be played quite a bit. So probably the biggest concern is going to be whether or not the middle player off the break goes here, and which way they're looking. That's obviously always the concern with the middle. But on a layout like this, it almost feels like it's really easy to get to the middle, so that's a concern. Because now all of a sudden these moves that we were just looking at are no longer free. So let's take a look at the Dorito middle routes, and then we will go to the snake side. So Dorito middle, we already looked at this, came up here, we looked at that. If we, for whatever reason, if we eliminate the number 2 and the number 1 is still stuck in the Dorito 1, that guy can't see us at all. So we can actually wrap pretty hard here and challenge the home. We can challenge the number 2 if he's playing that tower. And the number 1, and like the snake guy, can't see us depending on where in the snake they're at. So this player and their survival is super, super important. I mean, that's true for any layout, right? But in a lot of cases, you can be an island, especially on the Dorito side. The Dorito side usually does pretty well at being an island completely alone, where you've got, it's a 4v5 even, and then you've got some players, kind of distributed throughout the field. The challenge with this layout is that you can't see the number 1 if this guy dies. The 3, the guy playing the home in this situation, has to look Dorito way, and he has pretty far distances and small gaps to stop the Dorito attacker, and this number 1 does not have great answers to stop the Dorito side push, no matter where they are, right? Only until you get to the Dorito 3 do you really have a great response to stopping the wire push, and you have to go through a lot of gaps from middle players possibly looking your way for that to even be the case. So pretty tough Dorito side in my opinion. But assuming that we were able to push, we could come to this baby Dorito. I'm not sure why we would. We're just looking. You have some shots over towards the insert. Again, the same sort of snake cluster bunkers. So we'll take a look at the snake because I'm super curious as to what they can see from their perspective. So, I mean, this could be, you could come to this baby. You could challenge the Dorito 1, and then you could get to the 50 and be the attacker, just depending on where your teammate is. It's an alternative route, at least, if you lose your Dorito attacker and you found yourself here. You don't have to like lateral dive. You could come here and then go here. Again, this is really, that's a big gap, so it's hard to say which is better. It might even be more worth it for you to stay here, since you can stop the Dorito push, and then for your guy to fill behind. So, assuming he's even alive. I guess we can look at this Dorito side wedge too. So let's take a look at this. So again, this angle is not great. If there were two people alive and one of them was at the can and the other one was at the Dorito, this would actually be a really hard angle for you to hold. It's pretty hard to ignore that can player, even if he was at the tower even. It's pretty hard for you to angle your gun and your mask in such a way that they can't see your loader. So this would be a pretty hard spot to hold the Dorito 1 player from. If they were in the Dorito 2, however, this would be a little bit better. The challenge is that if they know you're here, this is a pretty decent snapshot for them and a bad angle for you to post on. So that's a pretty tough spot to be in. If they're in the Dorito 3, it's a great spot for you to shoot the player, but it's a pretty easy trade out, to be honest. So if every time you make this move from here to the door in front of you, you always have your gun pointing here, you can probably trade with anybody in these spots, depending on what division you're in. So just make sure to make this move with your gun up is probably what I would do on average. I'd probably not make this move, especially without checking it off. I would not make this move with your gun down. Okay, let's look on the inside. So snake stuff is way in play. A lot more of snake is in play now. You can see a lot more and they can see a lot more of you. And you probably do have a kill on the snake insert bunker. Maybe even if you float off, depending on where the Dorito guy is. If he's in the Dorito 1, you might even be able to float off and shoot some shots towards the snake corner, which would be scary for them. If they're not in the snake, this is a really good spot to hold. It's tricky because your reaction time window is pretty small, honestly, but depending on the angle they take, if they slide wide, you can actually have plenty of time to shoot them. If they run straight in, that's a pretty small window to shoot. So it just kind of depends what's going on. If you watch, maybe if you stand tall, you can see a little bit better and get a better read on when they move. But we'll look at the middle more in just a second, but let's look at the snake side now. Now over to the snake side. Let's take a look at, I mean, I think this tower is more of a snake side bunker than anything. But we can actually, yeah, let's look at that bunker first. So, I think this bunker is incredibly strong. It's almost strong enough that you could put two people here. You could have one person who floats back and shoots one way or the other. I think it's probably safer for the guy floating back to shoot towards Doritos, and for anybody who would want to double this up for whatever reason to be pushing up and shooting snake way, because you can avoid the Doritos pretty quickly, and you still have really great visibility into whatever's going on in the snake. So by the time you get here, if they didn't get to the snake, you obviously have a massively big window. You have a bigly window you can hold, which is great. You can't see the snake. Oh, excuse me. You can't see the snake anymore, at least in the guns up layout, or at least as well, I should say. I wonder if you back off, if you actually could probably still hold this angle if you backed off. It just gets a little scary from the home player who might be able to nick your loader. And if you were to do that, this number 2, the challenge is that the number 2 here would obviously be shooting crossfield, and then they would have to find something else to do. So you can't really double this up at this point, I don't think, because you can't stop the Dorito push for the most part, I don't think. The home player could contain you if you're not careful. And then the snake player needs to probably stay here. They could, if you wanted, they could come here if you doubled up, and then this person holds crossfield, and then this person then rotates and shoots this way. That's an option. I just don't know how much I love having two players, right next to each other in these two bunkers, but it kind of feels like a one-man job that you changed based on what you hear. So if you, let's say, for example, let's say you've cleared out the snake side. Let's say it's Tiger 2 on the snake, and you've got 3 bodies essentially on the snake side. You have the attacker, the support, and then you. So you'd be essentially the number 3. You can't really wrap and hold anything. If the guy's at the home, you definitely can. You can wrap and hold the guy at the home. If he's at the can, you can stop him from moving, but so could probably the support player. So you don't want to be doing the same job. And if that's the case, and you wanted to support whatever's happening on the Doritos, you could definitely come here and then let those two fight a 1v2 essentially while you hold the Doritos side, depending on where they're at. So that's an option. I'm not sure I would do that by default, but the other alternative is that if they are in the snake, and you have two people alive on the snake side, so let's say it's 5v5, they got into the snake, you can't really do a lot here. Like there's a decent shot you probably have to bounce off of the cake and like threaten somebody for moving up. You don't have a lot of visibility onto what's going on in the snake, so it's possible that depending on where they're at, you know, let's say they're in this snake 3. I don't even know if that's snake 3 really, but they're at this snake mini W and you're still here and you have two people alive on the snake side. It might be more worth it for you to come here because now you can see the outside of the snake. I'm not sure you can get high enough to shoot down on anybody because you might just get shot. But in the meantime, if they're not there, you could shoot towards the Dorito way. It's hard to say. So, but that's all to say that I don't think this laydown door is completely useless. It's just a very aggressive place to put yourself when, you know, you still have 5 bodies alive, right? And if you lose anybody on the snake side, you're in big trouble. Going on to the can now, you have a gap that you can shoot the home player, you know, that you can stop them from moving out. I don't think you would do that, honestly. Doritos side, you don't really have any visibility onto what's going on. You're actually in a really bad spot if they get to that 50. We looked at this earlier, but if they wrap the 50 on your side, you are definitely dead. So that's a free kill for them. I say free, but that's a kill for them for sure. If they're not there and you're able to stay here, it's I say pretty standard. A lot of times this is what the snake ends up looking like. You don't have anything obstructing your vision against your mirror, and you can also see somebody who's trying to fight into the snake. So in my opinion, these are really good opportunities. Hopefully you've been doing this all year long, but these are really good opportunities for like 2v2 drills where you have your support and your attacker in these two spots, and you just essentially fight, and the first person to get the snake 50 wins. You just do that a bunch. It's a great drill, but being able to practice on the layout specifically is really helpful. The one thing that is really tough about playing this spot, especially if you lose your attacker, is let's say, for example, let's say you mirror each other in your breakouts. So let's say your number 3 goes here, you're here, and then your attacker's here, and you lose your attacker. The biggest challenge is going to be that this guy in the tower can stop you really easily from moving. So certainly you have an okay-ish angle to stop the insert bunker getting into the snake. And I say okay-ish because, as you can see, I can't see the insert bunker. I have to like float off just to see it. So I have to back up, which exposes me a little bit to whatever's going on in this tower, or maybe somebody in the middle. But it's not great. Alternatively, I can come up here, and now it's a little bit better. But now I have to essentially be shooting paint through this gap. Like there's no way I could react to somebody diving in there. It would just be such a small window. I guess I shouldn't say no way, but it would be very hard. So the biggest challenge is that if you are in this configuration and there's somebody at the tower, they can stop you really easily. It's a really hard spot to fight from. And your best chance is if they're mirroring you, your best chance is to let this guy go, challenge this dude to get into flinch, and then fight this guy like it's essentially like you're the attacker, which you are in this case, but like you're an attacker and you're ignoring the snake player. If you can do that, if you can fight those two, then you can take the bite, and you might even be able to take one more, but I would just stop here. And now you have to do the same thing again, where you shoot this guy. The tower can't see you as well. If they're tall, they still might be able to shoot you, but if you dive, if you take this route and you go quick, you're probably safe from the tower. Just depends, right? There's always a possibility that they shoot your pack. If you go wide, the tower player will chop you up. So that tower player can shoot you for sure. But before we keep going, if we look at this angle, again, same sort of issue, right? So we have these big gaps that we have to shoot from, but we can ignore the tower a little bit more, assuming that we make this straight shot in. We can't stop the snake at all. There's nothing we can do to stop the snake. If we backfill, you can see the wire, but now you can't see anything on the inside, which is really tough. So You obviously can control the wire. This is a really, really tough spot. This bunker is like brutal. I'm not sure I would want to be here at any point. But the question is, does this bunker allow for you to do like an around the bend sort of route? And the answer is yes. So if instead if you're struggling to get into the snake off the break, whether that's because you're taking this route, or here, you could always do this route around the corner. It's just obviously if somebody else does that same thing, that's always a concern. You would have to slide here, you know, shoot a bunch of paint to stop them, maybe kill them, and then take the bite. And you can get low enough. You need to be able to get low, but you can get low enough that the tower guy can't see you. So if you survive that route, you have not a guaranteed route into the snake, but you have a pretty good route into the snake. Alternatively, if they aren't, for whatever reason, if they aren't playing the tower or this dead zone up into the tower, you can take the inside route pretty safe. So you can see that if I get low, have really good visibility. So I can actually even head check if I wanted to see if the tower's there first. Head check, see if he's there. If he's not, then take the bite. If he is, and I decide to go on the outside route, you're pretty slow, which sucks. But just remember, if you see somebody mirroring you making this move, and you look inside, or let me back up here for a second. So if they take this route and they head check your player and then they watch the corner, if you made the move into the snake first, your first reaction should be to hold the wire, because now you can stick them or you can keep them in the corner. So it's a little bit of it's hard to read that, right? So the reason I only mention this is because I don't think it's always a good idea to come here and check off the tower guy, because it puts you a step behind the guy that you're fighting against if they just took the outside route. Because as soon as they do, they can just come here and then stay posted, right? And then they prevent you from moving out of the corner, which would be really bad for you. So it's probably just always safer to come here, like run with your head up, dive, and then you'll see if the guy's in the tower or not, and then just do the same thing you've been doing. So going into the snake now, the same angle is going to be true all on the outside. We don't need to keep looking at that outside route. But like we saw before, we actually have pretty decent shots onto the Dorito 2, I think that is. So you have shots that you can challenge the Dorito 2 with. It also means that you can be surprised. So be very careful when you're taking this inside route against the Dorito. You don't even have to head check them. You could probably just get low enough and then start crawling to ignore them. But just always know that it's always a possibility that somebody just lobs a ball and then it falls down and hits the top of your pack. It's always a possibility, so just be careful. Assuming that we can get to this next snake bunker, we have big gaps that we can hold, especially if we lose the Dorito side. So really the biggest, I think the only time that you ever want to just sit and hold a gap as a snake attacker is if you lose your entire Dorito side and you're in transition to like stop the bleeding. So if you have a guy in the middle and then you have your support player behind you and then you let your support player do what he can to stop the snake, and then you stop the bleeding on the Dorito long enough for your middle guy to, you know, plug the hole and stop the bleeding. This is assuming that it's a 3v5. If you've killed everybody in front of you and it's a 3-on-3, you're just trying to flip the field on each other as fast as possible. But otherwise, I wouldn't really hold this gap. You definitely have shots that you can challenge the Dorito 3 on, and I would say pretty safely. So we already looked at that angle from the Doritos perspective. This is a pretty decent angle to challenge that guy from if you're still stuck here for whatever reason. I wouldn't look at anything more on the inside of this. And this angle, so this is as you can see, there's no gap here between these bunkers, between the 50 and this wedge. Looking at the picture, these are more, see how they're kind of overlapping in this? They are more in line with each other. So I do think there will be a slight gap in these bunkers. I'm not sure it'll be a big enough gap to like shoot anybody through, but it'll at least be a big enough gap that you can see. So be aware of that. If you're walking this layout online, there is a little bit more of a gap on the actual printed layout than there is here. So I think you're still probably free to just move up from this bunker to the next. I don't think there's anybody who can stop you except for the tower. So the tower standing tall actually has a pretty decent shot onto you. He would be the one that you would have to check off in order to make this move, but I don't think you have to worry about anybody heads up, assuming that they're matched, right? If they're mirrored to you. If they're at the 50 and they're like low wrapping on you, then you're just toast, obviously. But that's the only guy I think who's going to stop you is the tower, which again makes it even, still just an incredibly strong bunker, right? We looked at that angle from this perspective. but it wasn't as obvious. So that outside move, you can probably stop that by just dumping paint right there. If we go then to this bunker, no free kills. We can definitely pressure the Dorito Tower player if he's there. That guy's going to be hurting pretty bad. We can challenge the Dorito 1. I'm not sure that there's any value there. And of course, assuming that there's somebody in the middle, there's obviously tons of middle bunkers we need to worry about. So playing the snake is going to be tough because you always want to play as though there's a middle player, but that in a lot of layouts, it means that there's really only one bunker they're going to be at. But in this case, there's 3 very viable bunkers for them to be at. So obviously you should have plenty of visibility on where they go, but you just need to make sure that people don't die with really important information, because that'll protect your attackers on this layout for sure. I wouldn't challenge anything else here. You could always challenge the home player, maybe even the tower player. It's just that these inside angles favor people who are, because if you're in the home and they hear Snake 3 or something, that guy, if he's still in the home, is going to be shooting your way. So, and that's the exact angle that he's going to be shooting at. So I don't love challenging that. If we come out to this Dorito here, I'm not sure that there's any value in being here, except that there's a lot of over-the-top stuff you can do. So obviously, you can always come here to hold the wire, which is really good. But if you wanted to just be like an attacker on the snake, you have some pretty decent angles. It's just over-the-top stuff. Again, towards the home, snake side tower. You could go taller and even shoot towards the Dorito side can, which is really strong in my opinion. But you always run the risk, right, of just getting plucked out for free. We want to get as far down the field as fast as possible to be shooting next packs and backs, more so than we want to be challenging people in gunfights, especially as a snake player. So the next big gap to get through, obviously, this is going to be, you're going to be able to see each other here at this point. So you have to make sure you know where the snake attacker is, otherwise you're in trouble. And I also think that these bunkers here are safest to be in. I would be very careful about being here by default, right? Even if you get this guy, even if you beat this dude, you always run the risk of this guy just coming here and then wrapping and shooting you in the pack or in the leg or something, right? Because if you're the widest person is the snake attacker, and even if the guy behind you is like right here, he can't see this player getting low and wrapping, right? If I'm in this bunker, I can't see that player. So I can't protect you if there's a guy in the 50 wrapping and shooting you. So just be aware of that. This looks to be a snake where having 2 people in the snake is really strong, because that second snake guy can just control the wire the whole time and then do some kind of over-the-top stuff, right? Even if it's just to gain intel, you can come up over the top and see really clearly what's going on. And if you lose your snake attacker, you're already there, which is great. So I would probably try to get 2 people in the snake. It seems to be that's a pretty solid plan. But if we go back to the same angle, the only people that can stop us looks to be the same Dorito or the same snake side tower guy is going to stop us. You could be surprised by a juice box player like we talked about, or a door player, moving up. I just think that if you knew that there was a tower guy when you checked off here, like say for example, you come here, you got the tower guy to flinch, and then you took the second bite, you would just want to make sure that if you wrap, because you're going to have to, if you wrap and you don't see him here, you should be worried about the door. The only other alternative is he's looking inside on the snake side tower, and then he's not a problem. But we want to check off the spots that are problematic for us. It looks like the home player could actually stop you depending on how low you can get. But it looks like the home player, if they're standing really tall, could actually lob some paint down into you. So this isn't a free move, even if you check off the snake side tower, so be aware. But if we get to the 50, Dorito side can is a pretty solid shot. It's not a free kill. The Dorito 1 is, again, even more of a solid shot. Again, none of these Dorito players are free. They're definitely kill targets. I don't think the Dorito side tower can survive at this point. They could if they were living behind their gun on the Dorito side, but if they're just playing their bunker like normal, I think you probably shoot a pack here, depending on how small they can get, if they're in their knees or whatever. So they could survive, but I just think, on average, if you get here and they're not expecting that, you'll probably get a kill. I'm not sure how well you can see the Dorito 3 if you float off. That'll be something you have to check at the field or at the tournament. And otherwise, that seems to be pretty standard. If you wrap on this bunker, now you have a really solid shot or really solid challenge towards the god bunker or the insert. You can ignore the can, interestingly enough. You can even ignore the god if you wanted to and come in low wrap. And you probably have a better shot at the home than what we're seeing now. So the home player would definitely die if you wrapped this. The snake side can or tower is definitely dead here. And obviously, if we get to their side of the field, you know, that's usually when we just get free kills all over the place. But if you come here specifically, you can kill if there's anybody playing in the backside of that, like Dorito Junction, like the Omaha bunkers, you can get a free kill there. You still, again, these Doritos are pretty strong. They're protected pretty well from the snake. But again, that same sort of angle you can take. I think the Dorito side can is really in trouble here. It's probably not a free kill still, but definitely a scary spot to be in. And then if you come up over the top, I think you kill a Dorito player there in the Dorito 1, mostly because they just won't be expecting you. So, because they can't see you really, right? The Dorito 1 player is not expecting you at all. They could be shooting at you, but they won't be hitting you. And then if you go low enough, you come here, you get in that like low kneel, they still can't see you, come up over the top. There's no way that Dorito player is expecting you to make that. So, anything else past this point is just, you know, walk the field. It's a pretty simple, like, check off each spot and get kills for free, right? So that's the Dorito side. Excuse me, that's the snake side, not the Dorito side. That's the snake side. Let's now take a look at the middle here real quick. Okay, so the middle now. We already talked about the back center part, but we'll revisit it again really quickly, which is that you have much better angles on the Dorito side if you're playing on the surface of the bunker. So you have a better angle shooting towards the Dorito runner than you do towards the snake runner. This is a hard shot to hit. And I mean, that's like the first ball you shoot needs to kill that guy. The way you make that angle better is if you come up over the top, because you can see a lot more. However, you'll expose yourself to your mirror. And for that reason, I think that the home player is going to be shooting towards the Dorito way most of the time. The alternative, however, is instead of playing the home at all, you send your number 3 up this blind like we talked about before when we were looking at the Dorito side. So if you send this guy up towards this this wedge, you actually have a really, really good shot towards the can player or even the tower player if they play that spot. So that's great. I think there's a lot of things you can do with that. So if you find that the route up to that wedge is just, you know, not livable, you can always pull back and shoot towards the Dorito runner and then delay out. Or if you find that this really is just a 50-50 that's worth taking, then do it. There's a couple ways I can see this layout going, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But again, you have really solid shots going up towards this wedge, towards the snake side, even up towards the Dorito side. I just think they're a lot tighter. So if it were me, I would be shooting my gun towards the Dorito, excuse me, the snake way. Getting up into the snake or the center wedge, really good shots. Again, challenging somebody from the inside here. This angle sucks for you, but it is what it is. You can obviously shoot the God player on the inside or outside, so not as great of you have a really small window to react if they decide to take that bite quickly, but depending on how fast or slow they are, this is a great spot to post up on somebody. If you decide to look Dorito way, you actually can't see much of the Dorito attacker, but you can see the support player. The challenge will be that if they take this outside route up to the tower, like we talked about on the Dorito part of this walkthrough, that you can't see that move. You might be able to know that they made the move if the bunkers, you know, shake, but otherwise you have pretty decent windows to hold. So for example, if you get Tiger 2 on the Dorito side, this is a monster hold. That home player has no idea that you're here, and it would be very hard. And then there's just no way they're going to survive this gap, right? No way. If you come here, you lose everybody on the Dorito side, and you try to run through that gap, you're just toast. So really, really solid bunker. If we decide to dive out towards the snake side wedge, we looked at this earlier, but this is where being a snake player gets really scary because now you can see the outside route on this mini W. We'll take a look at it over the top. You can see it's that first one. You have really solid shots in that first one. You can't see the inside route as much. That would definitely be something you can't see. But obviously posting up here on them would be scary. So that means that you snake players need to head check very quickly to see if there's somebody here. And if for whatever reason you guys just kind of ignored each other, this outside route from the mini wedge up into the 50 brick, or this outside route or really the inside route up into this, you just see a lot of what's going on into that 50. So this is a really, really good spot to surprise somebody in the snake with, but if they see you here, you're kind of in trouble. Alternatively, if we wanted to shoot the Dorito way, you can shoot the home, really solid. You can shoot the snake side tower on the inside. You could shoot them on the outside as well, but it's just a lot more of a stretch. If you pulled up more shallow than that, you can see this guy making the move up to the Dorito tower, or trying to take a bite, becoming the attacker on the Dorito side, or any sort of inside, head check or look. And if you get low, you can actually either shoot them in the Dorito 2, or you can shoot them as they try to take this bite from the Dorito 2 to the Dorito 3. Excuse me, that was a mouthful. So really solid bunker. Obviously, the challenge with being in the snake side wedge shooting cross is that you expose your back to the snake, and if they get to the 50 and then stand up, you're dead. So I don't generally love getting up the 50 and close to one side shooting cross field. I don't think that's a good idea, generally speaking. But it is something you can do either in response, or if you come here and you want to surprise somebody and get a quick kill, do that and then go back to looking in the snake way. And then alternatively, we looked at this spot again, but we'll do it, or we looked at it already, but we'll do it again. So coming here, you can shoot the God, really solid spot to shoot cross field from, and you're actually really well protected from the Doritos. So you definitely have a shot there. You don't really have a kill on the snake anywhere, but you can definitely threaten somebody. The problem is if you miss and they know you're there, now you're in trouble. So if you decide to ignore the snake and shoot Dorito way, this is a spot. It's going to be hard to survive against the snake, but we already looked at these. You have lots of different angles to hold from, lots of different gaps to shoot. And then the last thing is if you decide to take the bite up into their wedge, I really think this is a spot you leapfrog from. I don't think this is a spot you play, right? Generally speaking, when you make these types of moves, you've gotten a kill that kind of opens up this path. So whether that's you killed the snake attacker, the Dorito attacker, or even the middle guy, sometimes eliminating the middle guy and nobody else on the outside knows that, they will just keep playing heads up, and then you can come here and set up a trap really quickly, eliminating somebody. You can do it on either side. I think the middle on this layout is what equalizes a lot of the just aggressive pushing from either side of the field, which is typically the case, right? The middle is supposed to be stopping the front players, or at least making them pause. But I think especially on this layout, having a presence in the middle forces your Dorito attacker to slow down, because like we talked about before, this gap from here to here, or even from here to here, is really solid. It's really easy to make because you don't have to worry about your Dorito attacker. You guys can't see each other. And that means you only have one person you have to check off, and it's the guy that's either in the can or the tower. But if you're consistently going up the middle, it means that there's way more gaps, way more angles that they can shoot you from, which means you just have to slow down. You have to know where the middle player is. And the same is true for the snake. So the snake generally, or at least before we looked at the middle, the snake has a lot of ways in which they can get up the field and kind of shoot cross and check off stuff. But before, it was only really the tower and maybe this door that we had to worry about that was going to stop us from moving up the field. But if they're in this wedge on the snake side, or in the wedge in the center, or even the Dorito side wedge, all of those spots become really scary anytime we tried to head check over the top of our bunker. So the middle is definitely you have to have a presence in the middle on this layout, because that's gonna be what causes the outside guys to slow down and take a second. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in the middle every point, but it just means that you have to be enough of a threat in the middle that it causes them to pause, right? So being able to scout people's breakouts, knowing when they like to go to the middle, whether that's off the break or in some sort of delay, or if they don't go to the middle at all, can really be super helpful to know what your attackers can do or how aggressive they can be. Because I think the straight heads up fights are not that great, like we looked at. The snake can't really see each other unless you shoot down the wire. There's a lot of inside, like zigzag, snaky sort of stuff that you can lose each other in. And so that doesn't mean that you're really like fighting each other a lot. You're just trying to lose each other. And the only thing that slows that down is some kind of middle presence that can shoot those gaps, right? Same is true for the Doritos, like we just said. The Dorito attackers can't really see each other until you get up to the Dorito 3 or the Dorito 50, really. So the only thing that really stops them is the support player or somebody in the middle who's looking for those gaps that people are running through, which is what's going to slow them down for sure. So really interesting layout. There's a lot of different things you can do. So let's talk about the breakouts and we'll finish with that. So as far as breakouts are concerned, I think, like I said, by default, you will probably have your home player, if they are playing the home, shooting the Dorito way. You certainly can come up over the top and shoot the snake, but I think by default, if you want to kill the snake player, I think this is your number 2 is the guy that does that. Alternatively, you could have this be the number 3 and you could force more bodies out towards the snake side. So we'll just look at what I think is probably like the super standard default breakout, which is going to be something like this. Really, the one can be in any of these spots, right? And again, you could go to the corner if you wanted, but you would just have to, you'd have to know that it's only to get into the snake if you're going to do that. So I think this is a super standard default breakout. The way that you kind of spice this up, it really comes from your number 2s and 3s, like most layouts or excuse me, most breakouts. So one alternative you can do is your number 3 plays this spot, shoots Dorito away, because you would still like to have some kind of Dorito coverage. You don't do anything different on the Dorito side. I think this is going to be pretty standard. I think taking a bite to the Dorito 2 is only going to come from this move. I don't know how common it'll be for people to do this. That just seems really risky. So it's always an option. It's paintball. There's always options. I would definitely try stuff out, but I just think that this is the Dorito, and this Dorito can is going to be pretty standard throughout most of the tournament. So I think what you're going to see a lot of nuance is going to come from these spots right here. So like I said, you could have your number 3 play this gap going up to the tower, excuse me. Your number 2 play here, and again, your number 1 going to any one of these bunkers. They can either go to the corner and in, or just straight to one of these. You could double up this spot where I think you have your number 3 playing behind. Actually, I'll make it even more obvious. Your number 3 plays behind, shooting Dorito away. Your number 2 plays up into this spot as he comes up here. And then your number 1, you have a couple of options. This would allow you to pull short if you wanted. I just don't know if I like that. Oh, okay. Sorry for the breakup. We lost camera, which is fine. We'll keep going. So I don't know if I love having your snake player pull short in this situation, but it is an option, something you can do for sure. So that's an alternative. The other is to have your number 3 come here and you push out your 2, and then your 1 goes in one of these spots, right? I think we talked about that already. There's just lots of different options here. Another one is that you can actually have your 2 here, and he can shoot whichever direction, probably the Dorito side in this case, and then your number 3 comes up to here, shooting snake way. And then your 1, again, can go here, or really in any one of these spots. The difference between sending them to the can versus sending them here to the snake is really just you have to factor in how much you've been surviving going into any one of these bunkers, and then make a decision based on that. Generally speaking, I think if you're playing sort of like a middle push or middle position, I would try to avoid being in this spot. Mostly because, like we said, if they get to the tower and they look snake way, this is a super hard spot to get out of. So you almost want to risk the body to get out wide. The only challenge is that if you lose that body, you have nobody to fill to be the attacker. So again, another alternative is that you have your number 2 here, your 3's here, your 2's here, and then if you lose a body, your number 3 can fill out. That's probably the safer route, just because if you do this is a pretty aggressive position. I would say this is a very aggressive position. So it just means, again, if you lose your snake side, you just don't have anybody who can actually attack that, and you're kind of banking on your Dorito players winning the game for you before you lose on the snake side. I don't think that I don't know how common it will be to kind of float here and then come to this spot and play here. It might be the case that you find some routes that come from here up to the Dorito right away, or from here up to this snake side wedge. I think that'll be fairly common. You might even find also that this route into here is somewhat common, into this baby, and then up into the 50. That might be an alternative route into the 50. I'll take a pause here and say I really like this layout for that very reason. It's just that there's so many different routes or options into certain spots. And the same is even true for the snake side, that we're talking a lot about this tower being essentially a support player's position, but it also could be the case that you could easily do this, where your number 1 is doing a lot of shooting off the break, and then he just runs and dives into the snake. So the challenge is obviously just the tower guy could chop you up if you're not careful. But if you look at it from this perspective, if you're shooting this way, right? You're really the one who's aggressing onto people. There's nobody who's going to shoot back at you very likely off the break. The only person that's going to stop you is going to be the tower, or excuse me, the home. So if you wrap and shoot the home and then you just commit to this move, the tower player sees you in this gap, but if you go low enough, you might go underneath their paint. It's possible, but it's also possible they just chop you up. So that's one of those where I would definitely try that at practice, see if that route works. But that's definitely an option for you, is to just come here. So there's several routes into the snake. We've talked about this pretty much already, but you can go this route. You can take this inside route here. You can come outside. You can go flat, and then you can go outside and then either inside or out from the corner. So lots of different routes here. The difference between, we've talked about this a lot before, but the difference between shooting here and here is not very different. But the difference between shooting either of those versus flat here is very different. So the difference between somebody putting paint here to stop that inside route, or even a little bit behind it to stop stuff right here, is very different than somebody shooting for you to run flat into the snake. So even if they're killing you in the snake, just don't write it off entirely to say, oh, well, they shot me in the snake off the break, therefore they have the snake shot. There's so many different ways you can shoot, or rather get into the snake, that you should just try that. So like the difference in distance from these spots here, here, and here is very, very, very different. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this layout review video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know it was a long one, but hopefully you learned something. Let me know down in the comments below if you think this is a snake side heavy field, a Dorito side heavy field, or a middle heavy field. I'm very curious to know what people think. Me personally, I actually think that the middle of the field is going to determine a lot of the games. I think the middle dictates the pace entirely, and being able to be lost in that through repositioning or just running through, I think is going to make or break a lot of points, especially in the Pro Division. So, but I think outside of that, it's going to be middle, snake, and probably Dorito for me. But again, anything's possible. I just think the middle is going to dictate a lot of how this layout plays. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Be sure to like the video. It helps out the channel a lot. And be sure to subscribe if you're not already. I will be at World Cup commentating with Ghost Sports. So if you see me there, be sure to say hi. I always appreciate it. I always appreciate people coming up and introducing themselves. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.